Once the Crayford Farms got into difficulties with their banks, Alan read my book, You Can Bank On It, that I'd written back in the early 2000s about events in the 95, 98 period where we were put into receivership ourselves and our own family farm was taken from us under the same sort of bank pressure that the farmers are experiencing today. Well, the book details the manner in which our relationship with our bank deteriorated. We discovered that the bank was overcharging our overdraft accounts interest well in excess of what the document said we were to pay, and we eventually discovered this practice had gone on for quite some time. Once we approached the bank with this problem, where we expected them to remedy the situation, we in fact ended up in a dispute with them. Unfortunately, we didn't realise that the bank had a problem with this overcharging practice, and while we thought we were negotiating with them, in fact they were taking us out. Exactly the same pressure, in the same method as what they're putting pressure on farmers now. The tactics were identical. Just gradually we felt our finances were being squeezed to the point that eventually they put us into receivership. Yeah, well, that's a very good question, because that's what we always believed would happen. Sadly for us, as the dispute developed, we were unaware that another National Australian owned bank in Ireland had actually had the same practices exposed by some journalists in Ireland, and that led to an Irish High Court investigation which identified the practice that we had found as fraud. And I now believe, and I contend, that the bank took us out to keep that fraud covered up. And if not that, then we have very little explanation to explain the manner in which the bank behaved, and we really cannot explain why they were so severe on our business to the point of driving us into receivership. Yes, well, that is very interesting in itself, is it not? Particularly as over the period of time since then, since the late 90s, since we went into receivership there, right through till now, 12 and a half years or so, we have been to every authority that you can imagine in New Zealand. We've been to the Serious Fraud Office, the Companies Office, Commerce Commission, Securities Commission, Prime Ministers, Ministers, the Reserve Bank, and so on and so forth. Of course, the Banking Ombudsman. And we've discovered that there's no authority in New Zealand that actually is prepared to uphold the law in this instance. Well, yes, the case has been mentioned in Parliament at all levels. There's select committees. We've had petitions to Parliament on a variety of things, but I think the most pointed event would have been when the Minister of the time in the last government, Minister of Commerce, who was Pete Hodgson at the time, he was asked a question in the House in relation to why the authorities hadn't investigated these matters with the Bank of New Zealand, and particularly in line with the Irish High Court investigation of the National Irish Bank. The Minister's reply, which is on Hansard, of course, was he clearly identified the fact that we did have prima facie evidence, although the answer to the question, he indicated that we didn't necessarily have prima facie evidence of other people. That is actually technically not correct. However, the fact that the Minister did identify the prima facie evidence leaves me rather bewildered, or I would have to say that he has left himself in breach of his oath of office, I would say, in that he has failed to ensure that the law was upheld, knowing there was prima facie evidence of a case that would indicate that there was a fraud as discovered by the Irish High Court. Well, with this 12 and a half years of the lobbying, banging on every door of authority in New Zealand, has showed us a lot of things that don't work, and I think the people that are suffering now can quite clearly see they don't want to go down that same road. So already we've found that it's quite helpful to meet up with these people where they're taking steps. For example, the Bankers Code of Practice review that's currently going on. People have been putting in submissions to that in the hope that they might get some sort of improvement, where we've been able to show them submissions that were done back in 1999 that are exactly the same as the ones they're putting in now, and of course proving to them or showing to them that the Bankers Code of Practice, in fact, is not effective in protecting the public. It is simply has simply been a means to put a smokescreen up to keep the politicians away from passing legislation in order to protect the customers of the banks in such circumstances. Well, it's become quite clear from the experiences of recent weeks and all of the people that we've met that the practices of the debt recovery that the bankers are enforcing on farmers have become very, very wasteful, and the productivity that's being wasted, the farmland values and so on, have proven that the methods that are being used by the receivers and the recovery actions of the banks is costing the whole industry very large sums of money. In fact, in the Crayfor farms, for example, we've found that the share milkers on the Crayfor farms are losing very large sums of money from direct loss of production. Production now that measures out to this season an estimated 2.5 million kilos of milk solids will be lost by very reckless and seriously bad decisions that have been made by the receivers. The share milkers now want to lay an official complaint about the reckless behaviour of the receiver, and that is what we intend to do. We've met with some of the biggest dairy operators in New Zealand. In fact, three of the people in particular between them would have operations very close to $500 million worth. That's only three people, and they have produced millions and millions of kilograms of milk solids, and obviously many, many millions of dollars worth of production and export revenue for New Zealand. This whole situation has now become very, very serious, and that the ramifications of it are now getting into very, very large sums of money. The Crayfor farms alone, and the loss of production, as the farms are valued largely on their productivity, that is, a farm will be sold at a price per kilogram of milk solids. Generally speaking, like in recent times, those farms have been selling at around about $30 or $40 per milk solid. So, of course, 2.5 million milk solids that have been lost equates out to about $75 million worth of land value that's been lost. The harsh reality of this, though, is that not only do the share milkers lose, but so do all the other farmers in the district, because this devaluation of those properties is now impacting on neighbouring farms throughout the whole district, and in fact farms throughout of New Zealand. So many farmers are now suffering financially very, very serious ramifications from their banks by the fact that the value of those properties has been decreased to such a large extent. And the problem with this is it is all through lost production, through reckless management of the receiver. Back in 1997, we set up a group called the Bank Customer Action Collective with the objective of exposing the anomalies that we're experiencing, seriously trying to get the authorities to act and do their job and call these bankers to account for some of the issues that we're exposing. More latterly, we became involved in a group, or set up a group called Eatwell, which is exposing unacceptable financial activities, and that was more particularly focusing on the malpractices involved in the finance company collapses, and of course, once again, the failures of the authorities to act and uphold the law on behalf of the investors in those companies. It is that 12.5 years of experience that now we intend to bring to the fore to assist the whole industry, including the farmers and all of the other business people that are now suffering from the pressures of their bankers and of course the receivers and all of the other people that now become involved. The reason I've become so angry about all of this is because over this 12.5 year period we've lobbied every area we possibly can think of to have these problems recognised. And throughout that period, at every level of government and authority, we've been led to believe that things are improving. In fact, even on the back of my book, there's a credit from the banking ombudsman, which suggests to me that, although they couldn't help me, that at least what we'd done was going to help other bank customers. And of course, now we're seeing and meeting all these people, we realise that is nothing but a lie. We've seen things the likes of the Bankers Code of Practice being used to offset the Farm Debt Mediation Bill, and we've seen all sorts of other smoke screens put up to suggest to bank customers that they had some protection, when we're now finding in fact that they have not. And that, of course, does make us very, very angry after putting in so much effort over so many years. But when you meet people in their own homes that are under this pressure, they're good, high-producing farmers, largely the ones we've met in the last week. And you realise that the same bully tactics, the same, draconian powers that have been brought to bear, misuse of the Property Law Act, for argument's sake. Of course, the Receivership Act has just been used, flouted left, right and centre. People's rights have been trodden on. We are very angry, and we're finding now it is time that we bring this to the authorities. The government have a very large obligation to the public here. The amounts of money that we're finding involved are definitely going to impact on New Zealand's economy. The trickle-down effect of that is endless and very, very frightening to estimate. But just in the figures that we've seen in the last week, if the government don't take this matter very seriously, we have some very, very serious times ahead of us that I would hate to think what the consequences are going to be for the individuals that are involved, of course, but for the downstream, the country towns, of course, and then right on down through the economy. And I reckon there'll be a few people in Wellington and Auckland that will have to cut out quite a few lattes of a week, because once it trickles down to them, I think you'll find that then we might see some action.